These notes are about fungi. This is the last part of the notes on the unit about Protista fungi and the origins of life. So fungi are eukaryotic heterotrophs with cell walls made of chitin. The cell walls between the cells are often incomplete, which means that even though they're separate cells, there's interconnections between the cells. An interesting and unique thing that happens in kingdom fungi is that they secrete enzymes to digest what they're consuming outside their body and then absorb the nutrients. Fungi kingdom includes mushrooms, molds, yeast, and plant parasites like smuts and rusts. So why should we care about fungi? Well, in our world, there are organisms that break down decaying organic matter, and those are called saprobes. And fungi are really important in the group of saprobes, along with bacteria. Now, it's really important that we have such things to recycle nutrients in the biosphere. Otherwise, if we didn't have recyclers and decomposers to take care of these things, we would have dead things sitting around all the time, and the complex organic molecules that make up the organisms would just be stuck like they are, and we couldn't reuse the amino acids and the smaller carbon compounds and so forth. So it's really important that we have organisms like fungi and bacteria that are able to decompose and break down help organic matter decay. There are also carnivorous fungi like Pleurotus, which invades roundworms as they crawl through it on bark of trees. And there are parasites that cause serious plant and animal diseases, among other things. The vast majority of fungi are useful. There are some that are harmful, but they are in the minority. So fungi bodies are composed of structures called hyphae. Hyphae are very thin filaments that are one cell thick, and altogether they make up the mycelium, which is the mass that make up the fungal body. Now here we have a picture of bread mold, and you see the white fuzzy stuff there. That's made up of the mycelium of hyphae. The mycelium extends not only on the surface here, but also as it digs into and grows into the bread. There are special mycelia that are kind of anchoring mycelia called rhizoids. They're kind of like roots. They're specialized to absorb nutrients and to help anchor the fungus to the surface that it's living on. And then there are fruiting bodies, which are reproductive structures that make spores. In the bread mold that you see here, the black dots that you see are not spores themselves, but sporangia. A sporangium is a spore-bearing body. It makes hundreds of spores that as they mature will be released to grow into new fungi. This is a picture of bread mold, okay, and on the diagram in the worksheet packet that you received in class, you can use these terms here to label the diagram in the middle of the page on the front. We have a sporangium, a couple of different stages here. The sporangium releases its spores. The stalk that holds up the sporangium is called a sporangiophore. We have here a stolon, which is kind of a lateral stem that connects clusters of sporangia to each other, and then the root-like structures called rhizoids that anchor the fungus to the surface that it's on and help absorb nutrients. Here are the structures of the fungi. Here's a hypha that shows the incomplete cell walls. Notice that there are several different cells here, each of which has a nucleus and other organelles, but they're separated by cell membranes, but also cell walls that are incomplete. We also have a picture here of yeast cells budding. Yeast cells are fungi that are unicellular. Most fungi are multicellular, but some are unicellular. And yeast cells, rather than producing fruiting bodies like the mushroom and other kinds of fruiting bodies that form in other kinds of molds and fungi, they undergo an asexual budding process. The nucleus undergoes mitosis, followed by a it's not really cytokinesis, but they have an extension that grows out that other nucleus is placed into, and that forms a kind of a daughter cell that's attached called a bud. And you'll see sometimes yeast cells that bud make branches budding off of each other. On the same front page of your fungi packet, at the bottom of the page, there is a diagram of yeast cells budding, and you should be able to follow along and identify the bud and the nucleus, the cytoplasm, the cell wall, and the vacuole that you found in the middle of yeast cells. Here we have a mushroom. Notice that the mushroom itself is not the body of the fungus. The body of the fungus, the mycelium, is the part that you don't see underground. The mushroom is actually just the fruiting body. Both the mycelium and the mushroom fruiting body are made of hyphae, but they're very tightly packed together, densely packed together in the mushroom. We have other kinds of fruiting bodies that you sometimes see on different kinds of fungi. This is a mold, another kind of mold fruiting body called a conidiophore. And here's a cup fungus called an ascus. And they're just different kinds of fruiting bodies. We're not going to worry too much about all the terminology that goes with fungi, as long as you know that there are different ways that they have of producing spores. There are parasitic fungi that cause diseases of man and of plants. We have athlete's foot. That's not uncommon at all. That's a parasitic fungus. We have yeast infections. We have ringworm, which is not a worm, but it's a type of fungus that infects the skin, and a number of other skin fungi that can cause various kinds of inconvenient, itchy kinds of lesions. There are also fungi that can destroy food crops and have a very negative impact on the economy. Wheat rust and corn smut and rye grow fungi called ergots that cause all kinds of problems for the farmers as well as those animals that might consume the infected products. There are also very beneficial fungi, and like I said earlier, most fungi are beneficial rather than harmful. These particular ones that show here are mutualistic relationships between plant roots and fungi in the soil, and these help the roots. Help the roots absorb nutrients and moisture from the soil. You see here two different samples of the same seed that were planted at the same time and grown in the same conditions. This sample had mycorrhiza in the soil. This sample did not. So there's a substantial difference in the growth of the grass here. These are very essential for plant growth. This is the reason why when you transplant trees, bushes, and flowers into your yard, you don't just wash off the roots of the soil. You plant the soil that they come in because the mycorrhiza are already there. If you plant just the bare roots in the soil, they're not going to grow as well. This is an evolutionary adaptation between the two, a beneficial, a mutualistic relationship, symbiosis between the fungus and the plants. Now, lots of things. Fungi can do lots of things. One of the things fungi do is that they produce drugs like antibiotics, and penicillin was the first one that was found back in the 1920s. A scientist accidentally had let a bacterial colony that he was growing get mold spores on it, and he noticed that where the mold was growing around that area, it was clear and there was no bacteria growing. And so he investigated and discovered that that there was a product that was produced by the fungus that actually killed or prevented the bacteria from growing. That was the first antibiotic that was discovered. There have been others since then. There are quite a few. Scientists are working all the time to increase our store of antibiotics that work on different kinds of conditions. And we saw in our last unit when we studied about bacteria and viruses that antibiotics do inhibit the growth of bacteria by interfering with the formation of cell walls. And you can test to see which one is most effective by taking discs soaked in various kinds of antibiotics, putting them on a bacterial plate, and measuring the diameter of inhibition, the zone of inhibition around each one. You can see by looking at this one that the most effective one is this. The control was probably either A or C, and others were somewhat effective but much less so than this